The food hit her face before she could duck. Chunks of expensive catering-grade chicken and vegetables sliding down her cheek, while Julian's sister's laughter echoed across the formal dining room. He sat 3 feet away, fork still in hand, watching his pregnant wife endure the assault Bianca found amusing. Though he made no move to intervene or defend her, Naomi realized too late that his family had orchestrated this dinner deliberately, designed to humiliate her one final time before suggesting he reconsider the marriage while he still had options. They questioned her background, mocked her appearance, and implied she'd gotten pregnant deliberately, building to this moment when his sister would physically demonstrate exactly how little they valued her. The morning's argument played on a loop in her mind. She'd asked him for $20, literally $20, to purchase the prenatal vitamins her doctor had prescribed for the baby's neural development. Yet he'd refused and accused her of always asking for money. He'd suggested she get a job, conveniently forgetting he'd insisted she quit working once they married because he wanted a wife who focused on the home. The chandelier above the dining table cost more than most people's cars, though Naomi had stopped noticing such things after 6 months of marriage to Julian Blackwell. She had noticed other things instead. The way his mother Veronica examined her clothing with the precision of a jeweler detecting flaws. The way his father Vincent spoke past her rather than to her. The way his sister Bianca smiled with her mouth while her eyes calculated cruelty. Tonight's family dinner had been presented as an olive branch, a chance for them to start fresh, though the thorns became apparent the moment Naomi arrived wearing a dress from Target rather than the boutiques Veronica preferred. How quaint, Veronica had murmured, her fingers brushing the fabric of Naomi's sleeve with the same expression someone might use when encountering a peculiar insect. Julian, darling, doesn't your firm offer some sort of clothing allowance for employees' wives? Julian had laughed, actually laughed, before explaining that Naomi preferred to be economical in a tone that made frugality sound like a character defect. Naomi's hand had moved instinctively to her stomach, to the small bump that was just beginning to show at 4 months. The same pregnancy that had changed everything between them. He'd been different before, attentive, warm, genuinely interested in her thoughts. But the positive pregnancy test had transformed him into someone who echoed his family's values rather than challenging them. The first course arrived with Veronica's commentary about proper nutrition during pregnancy, delivered while she pushed her own food around her plate without eating. Vincent had transitioned smoothly into questions about Naomi's family, questions designed to confirm what they'd already decided, that she came from nowhere, knew nobody, and brought nothing to marriage except the baby they clearly considered a strategic maneuver rather than a blessing. Your father, Vincent had said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin that probably cost more than Naomi's entire outfit. What does he do again? You've been remarkably vague about your family background. Naomi had rehearsed this answer 1,000 times, the careful truth that revealed nothing. He works in finance. Banking, specifically. Every word accurate, though the scale was something she'd hidden deliberately, desperate to find someone who loved Naomi Chun, the person, rather than Naomi Chun, whose father's signature could move markets. Banking, Bianca had repeated, her voice dripping with amusement. How wonderfully generic. Let me guess, he's a teller? No, wait, a loan officer at some strip mall branch. The mockery had continued through the second course, building like a symphony toward some crescendo Naomi couldn't yet identify. Julian had participated with his silence, his refusal to defend her speaking louder than words. She caught him glancing at his parents, seeking their approval with the desperation of a child afraid of disappointing authority. And she'd realized with crushing clarity that she'd married a man who'd never fully separated from his family's judgment. The morning's argument resurfaced in her mind with perfect, painful detail. She'd asked him for $20. The prenatal vitamins at the pharmacy cost $18.99. She'd explained, and her doctor had been emphatic about their importance for preventing neural tube defects. Julian had been getting ready for work, checking his reflection in the mirror while wearing a watch that cost more than some people's monthly rent, when he turned to her with genuine irritation. Naomi, we talk about this. You need to be more financially responsible. I can't just hand you money every time you decide you need something. It's not something I decided, she protested, hating the pleading tone in her voice. Dr. Morrison prescribed them for the baby's brain development. Then ask your family to help, he'd said, gathering his briefcase and keys. I wanted a wife who could manage a household budget, not someone who constantly needs handouts. The cruelty had been stunning, particularly since he'd insisted she quit her job as a corporate lawyer 3 months after their wedding. I want a wife who focuses on our home, he'd said then, making it sound romantic rather than controlling. Without income, without access to their joint account beyond the minimal household allowance he provided, she'd been exactly where he apparently wanted her, dependent, diminished, and desperate. Now, sitting at his family's dinner table with food dripping down her face, Naomi understood that the morning's refusal hadn't been about $20 at all. It had been about power, about keeping her small, about ensuring she remembered her place in the hierarchy they constructed. Veronica cleared her throat pointedly, indicating she should leave the table to clean up, adding that women who can't handle family dynamics wouldn't survive in their social circle. Naomi remained seated, food still dripping onto her lap, phone now visible in her hand as she opened her contacts and found a name she'd avoided using for 2 years. Her father had made her promise to call if she ever needed him, no matter the situation. Though she'd been determined to build a life independent of his wealth and influence, that independence had cost her dignity, safety, and apparently her husband's basic respect. But it was about to buy her something far more valuable: justice. What the Blackwell family didn't know was that Naomi's father had set up a trust fund when she was born, a trust fund that had bought 38% of Blackwell Construction Group 20 years ago when Vincent desperately needed investors. What they also didn't know was that her father, Samuel Chun, was the director of the Financial Crimes Division, with the power to investigate and shut down fraudulent businesses. Across the city, her father was finishing his evening review of major corporate accounts, including the portfolio that held this family's construction company, rental properties, and trust funds, all coincidentally up for their annual risk assessment. One phone call would begin the process. One conversation would freeze everything. One daughter's tears would cost his family everything they'd built. But the question that would haunt this evening wasn't whether she'd make that call. It was whether the family currently smirking at her humiliation would understand what they'd done wrong, even as they found themselves on the floor begging for mercy they'd never shown her. And would the man who denied her vitamins for their child finally realize that the woman he diminished owned the very foundation his family stood upon, from both the shareholder side and the government side? Bianca's laughter continued, joined now by Veronica's delicate chuckle, while Vincent sipped his wine as if assault by leftovers was simply dinner theater he'd paid to witness. Julian met her eyes finally, and what she saw there broke something fundamental inside her. Not guilt, not anger at his sister, but embarrassment. Embarrassment at her reaction, at her inability to handle his family's sense of humor, at her failure to be the kind of wife who could laugh off humiliation while pregnant with his child. The phone in her lap suddenly felt heavy with possibility, with the weight of a decision she'd sworn never to make. Naomi's thumb hovered over the call button for exactly 3 seconds before Bianca's voice cut through the dining room again, sharp and delighted with its own cruelty. Oh, God! She's just going to sit there. Julian, your wife is literally covered in food, and she's playing with her phone instead of cleaning herself up. Is this the kind of mother our nephew's going to have? Someone who can't even handle basic hygiene. The word nephew landed like another assault. The possessive entitlement of it, the assumption that this baby belonged more to Julian's family than to Naomi herself. Veronica nodded in agreement, her expression a masterclass in refined disgust, while Vincent checked his own phone, as if bored by the entire spectacle. Julian opened his mouth, and for one fragile moment, Naomi thought he might actually defend her, might finally choose his wife and unborn child over his family's approval. Naomi, he said quietly, his tone the one he'd used with misbehaving child. Maybe you should go freshen up. You're making everyone uncomfortable. She was making them uncomfortable, not Bianca, who'd thrown food at a pregnant woman, not Veronica, who'd orchestrated an evening of systematic humiliation, not Vincent, who'd spent dinner implying her family was trash. Her, for having the audacity to sit at their table with gravy in her hair and tears threatening to fall. The decision crystallized in that instant, sharp and clear as broken glass. Naomi pressed the call button, lifted the phone to her ear, and watched Julian's expression shift from embarrassment to confusion. The phone rang once, twice, and then her father's voice filled her ear, warm with immediate concern because he recognized her number even though she'd never called it before. "Naomi, what's wrong?" 3 words, and she heard everything she'd been missing in her marriage. Immediate prioritization of her well-being. No questions about whether she was being dramatic. No suggestions that she was overreacting. Just instant, unconditional concern. "Dad," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her, "I need you to initiate a full investigation. Blackwell Construction Group, Vincent Blackwell, tax evasion, contractor fraud, foundation misuse, everything." Across the table, Julian's confusion deepened, though he tried to maintain his composure in front of his family. "Naomi, who are you calling? What are you talking about?" Her father's voice sharpened with focus. "Whose investigation, sweetheart? Give me details." "I'll have the Financial Crimes Division issue the notice within the hour." Samuel Chun responded immediately. "Full audit, asset freeze, the works." "And Dad," Naomi continued, her voice steady and deliberate, "I'm also calling an emergency shareholder meeting. It's time they knew who owns 38% of their company." Vincent's phone buzzed, then Veronica's, then Bianca's, then Julian's, all within 30 seconds of each other, a synchronized notification that their world was about to end, though they didn't know it yet. They glanced at their screens with a casual entitlement of people who'd never experienced genuine consequences. Then their expressions changed as they read messages from the Federal Financial Crimes Division. "Dad," Naomi said, watching the color drain from Julian's face as he finally understood, "I'll explain everything. But right now I need you to know that your grandson almost didn't get the vitamins he needs because his father told me this morning that $20 was too much to spend on prenatal care." The silence that followed that statement was profound. Her father had 6 grandchildren from Naomi's 3 older siblings, and he bought them everything from college educations to their first cars. But he'd never had a son-in-law stupid enough to deny his own child basic medical necessities. $20, her father repeated, his voice dangerously quiet, while wearing a $15,000 watch. Naomi added, her eyes locked on Julian's face as understanding and horror battle for dominance. "And his sister just threw food at me during dinner. At my face, Dad, while I'm pregnant. While they all watched." Jesus Christ, Naomi. Her father's anger was palpable even through the phone. "The investigation is happening. All of their accounts and assets will be frozen. And, sweetheart, I'm adding a full forensic audit. If there's anything questionable in their finances, and there's always something questionable, I'll find it." Vincent stood abruptly, his phone gripped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "There must be some mistake. The Federal Financial Crimes Division is saying our accounts are frozen pending investigation. All of them. This is impossible. We've never had issues with tax authorities. This must be a mistake." "No mistake," Naomi said, standing slowly and feeling the baby shift inside her. "My father is Samuel Chun, director of the Financial Crimes Division. He takes anonymous tips very seriously, especially about construction companies hiding income and defrauding contractors." Veronica's wine glass slipped from her fingers, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. "But there's something else you should know," Naomi continued, turning her phone screen toward them. The screen showed official documents. Chin Family Trust, 38% ownership of Blackwell Construction Group, with Naomi Chin listed as primary beneficiary and voting shareholder. "The Chun Family Trust?" Vincent whispered, his face going from white to gray. "That's our largest shareholder. We've been paying dividends for 20 years. To me," Naomi finished, "my father bought 38% of your company when you were desperate for capital 20 years ago. You never bothered to find out who the Chens actually were. You just took the money." Bianca's laughter had died completely. Julian stumbled backward, knocking his chair over. "So let me be clear," Naomi said, her voice cold and precise. "My father is investigating you for financial crimes from the government side, and I'm calling an emergency board meeting to vote on suspending all operations from the shareholder side." "You can't," Veronica started. I absolutely can, Naomi interrupted. My 38% plus the 2 independent board members who've been complaining about Vincent's management for years? That's a majority vote. Julian finally found his voice, though it came out strangled and desperate. Naomi, you never said, I never knew. You never asked, she said simply. You wanted someone who'd love you for yourself, not your money. Well, Julian, I had more money than you all along. I just wanted someone who'd love me for myself. You passed that test for exactly 6 months, until loving me became inconvenient for your family. She walked toward the door, past the table where this family had tried to break her, past the chandelier that cost more than most cars, past the life she tried to build with a man who'd chosen his family's cruelty over her humanity. Naomi, wait! Julian called desperately, following her into the foyer. We can fix this. Just please, call off the investigation. Cancel the board meeting. I'll make this right. She turned, one hand on the door, one hand on her stomach. You had the chance to make things right this morning when I asked for $20 for vitamins. You had another chance tonight when your sister threw food at your pregnant wife. You had 6 months of chances, Julian. This is what happens when you run out. Now you'll learn what happens when you run out of chances, from both the government and your own shareholders. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click, and through the heavy wood, she could hear the beginning of what would become hours of desperate phone calls, frantic explanations, and eventually, inevitably, the sound of people who'd never begged for anything learning what it felt like to plead for mercy from someone who had every reason to deny it. Did you see that coming? Naomi just revealed she owns 38% of their company, and her father can investigate them. The Blackwell family has no idea what's about to hit them. Comment below, Team Naomi, or do you think she went too far? Should she show them mercy or make them pay? Hit that like button if you're Team Naomi all the way. The next chapter gets even more intense. You won't believe what happens when they start begging. Stay tuned. The call started before Naomi reached her car, before she'd even processed the weight of what she'd done, before the adrenaline could fade enough to let the shaking begin. Her phone lit up with Julian's number once, twice, 7 times in the span of 3 minutes. Each call going to voicemail because she'd turned off the ring of the moment she'd stepped outside. She sat in her modest Honda Civic, the car Julian had mockingly called her adorable little sedan, while he drove a BMW his parents had gifted him, and watched the notifications pile up like digital desperation. Julian, 8:47 p.m. Please answer. We need to talk. Julian, 8:48 p.m. Naomi, this is serious. My father's business accounts are frozen. Payroll is due Friday. Julian, 8:49 p.m. You're being unreasonable. Whatever happened tonight, we can discuss like adults. Julian, 8:51 p.m. My mother is having a panic attack. Are you happy now? The progression was almost predictable, starting with demands disguised as requests, escalating to blame, landing finally on guilt. She'd seen this pattern before in smaller conflicts. The way he twisted situations until somehow his failures became her overreactions, his cruelty became her sensitivity, his family's abuse became her inability to take a joke. But tonight the dynamic had shifted irreversibly, and no amount of manipulation could unfreeze accounts that were already frozen. Her father called at 8:53 p.m., his voice concerned but respectful of her boundaries. Naomi, sweetheart, I have 6 different lawyers calling me right now claiming to represent the Blackwell family. Do you want to take their calls, or should I let them keep panicking for a while? Despite everything, Naomi felt a smile tug at her lips. Let them panic. They've earned it. They've earned a lot more than panic, her father said grimly. The preliminary audit is already showing some interesting discrepancies. Nothing criminal yet, but Vincent has been listing personal expenses as business deductions. His construction company has been underpaying contractors and then tying them up in arbitration when they complain. Bianca has 3 different credit cards maxed out, all guaranteed by the family trust. And Julian, he paused, his disgust palpable even through the phone. Julian has been withdrawing cash from your joint account. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger alerts, but consistent. 200 here, 300 there. over the past 6 months. It adds up to about $15,000 you probably didn't know was missing. Naomi's hand tightened on the steering wheel, the number hitting her like a physical blow. $15,000. While he'd refuse her 20 for vitamins. While he'd lecture her about financial responsibility. While he'd suggested she was the one who couldn't manage money. "Where did it go?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would hurt. Restaurants, high-end bars, hotels. Her father's voice was gentle but honest. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. The credit card receipts attached to those withdrawals show charges for 2 people, and the timing suggests—" "He's been cheating," Naomi finished, the word surprisingly steady despite the betrayal blooming fresh and sharp in her chest. "Of course he has. Why else would he be so eager for his family to convince me to leave?" The pieces assembled themselves with cruel clarity. The sudden coldness after the pregnancy announcement, the increasing criticism, the way he joined his family's campaign to make her feel worthless. He hadn't just been choosing his family over her. He'd been looking for an exit strategy, a way to end the marriage that wouldn't make him the villain. If they could break her down enough, make her desperate enough, maybe she'd be the one to leave. Maybe he could play the victim, the good man whose wife abandoned him and their unborn child. "Do you want me to destroy him?" her father asked, and Naomi knew he meant it literally. "Because I can. One phone call, and I can make sure Julian Blackwell never gets approved for so much as a gas station credit card. His family's construction business depends on lines of credit that I personally oversee. I can make them all disappear." Naomi, "Completely. Say the word." The temptation was powerful, seductive even. She imagined Julian's face when he realized the full extent of what he'd lost. Not just her, but his entire financial future. She imagined Bianca unable to buy the designer clothes she wore like armor. She imagined Veronica and Vincent watching their real estate empire crumble, because no institution would touch them after Samuel Chin blacklisted their names. But then the baby moved again, a gentle flutter that reminded her she wasn't making decisions just for herself anymore. "Not yet," she said finally. "Right now I just want them to understand what they've done. I want them to spend tonight making phone calls that go nowhere. I want them to feel powerless and desperate and small. Tomorrow we can talk about permanent consequences." "That's my girl," her father said with approval. "Strategic and merciful. Though between you and me, mercy might be wasted on people who throw food at pregnant women." "Probably," Naomi agreed, watching another call from Julian light up her screen. "But I want to see them beg first. I want to watch them realize that the woman they treated like trash has been holding all the cards since the beginning. I want them on their knees before I decide whether to help them back up." Her phone buzzed with a video call request. Julian's contact photo filling the screen, the picture from their wedding day when he'd still looked at her like she mattered. She answered it, curious despite herself, and found herself looking at a scene of complete chaos. Julian's face filled the frame, but behind him she could see Veronica pacing frantically, Vincent on one phone while gesturing wildly with his other hand, and Bianca crying. Actually crying, mascara running down her face in dark streams. "Naomi, please," Julian said, and there was the begging she predicted, right on schedule. "Please, just tell your father this was a misunderstanding. My dad's lawyers say the accounts could be frozen for weeks during an investigation. We have employees who won't get paid. We have contracts that will default. You have a wife you denied $20 for prenatal vitamins?" Naomi interrupted, her voice calm and clear. "You have a sister who assaulted me at dinner. You have parents who spent 6 months trying to convince you I wasn't good enough for your family. What you don't have is the right to ask me for mercy you never showed." "I'll make it right," Julian promised, desperation bleeding through every word. "Whatever you want. Family counseling, marriage therapy. I'll cut my family off completely if that's what you need. Just please, Naomi, please fix this." Behind him, Veronica stopped pacing, her face twisted with the effort of maintaining composure. "Julian, don't beg her. We have rights. We have lawyers. She can't just—" "Yes, she can, Mother." Julian snapped, the first time Naomi had ever heard him contradict Veronica directly. "She absolutely can. Because apparently my wife is Samuel Chen's daughter, and we've been treating her like she's nobody for 6 months. So yes, I'm begging. I'm begging my wife not to destroy my entire family, because we were too stupid and too cruel to see what we had. Naomi felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that Julian was finally seeing clearly, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost, what he'd risked, what he'd thrown away for his family's approval, and whatever cheap affair he'd been funding with money stolen from their joint account. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said quietly, "after you had time to think about what kind of man refuses his pregnant wife money for vitamins, but spends $15,000 on hotels and restaurants with someone else. After your family has had time to think about whether throwing food at people is really the kind of behavior that deserves mercy. After you've all had a chance to really, truly understand what you've done." She ended the call before he could respond, before she could see the impact of mentioning the $15,000, before the begging could continue. Her phone immediately lit up again, Julian, Bianca, even Veronica's number appearing for the first time ever. But Naomi silenced them all and started her car. The drive to her father's house took 20 minutes through quiet streets, and with every mile she felt the weight of the evening settling onto her shoulders. She'd used the nuclear option. She'd deployed the weapon she'd promised herself she'd never touch. She'd become exactly what she'd feared, the rich girl who solved problems with her father's money and power. But then she remembered Bianca's laughter as food dripped down her face, remembered Julian's embarrassment at her reaction rather than his sister's action, remembered Veronica's suggestion that she clean up, remembered 6 months of systematic degradation designed to make her feel worthless. And she thought, maybe some people need to learn that actions have consequences. Maybe some cruelty deserves to be met with justice rather than endless forgiveness. Maybe mercy is something you earn, not something you can demand while still laughing at the person you've hurt. Naomi woke in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by memories of a simpler time when her biggest concern had been algebra homework rather than whether to financially destroy her husband's family. Her father had insisted she stay the night, had prepared her old room himself with fresh sheets and the lavender pillow spray she'd loved as a teenager. Small gestures of care that highlighted everything missing from her marriage. Sunlight filtered through familiar curtains, and for a moment she could pretend the previous night had been a nightmare rather than a necessary reckoning. Her phone showed 67 missed calls, 89 text messages. She scrolled through them while her hand rested on her stomach, feeling the baby's morning movements, the small flutters that reminded her every decision now affected 2 lives instead of 1. Bianca, 11:34 p.m. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please call me." Veronica, 12:07 a.m. "Naomi, we need to discuss the situation as adults. I'm certain we can reach an understanding." Vincent, 1:23 a.m. "Miss Chun, this is a business matter that should be handled through proper channels. Your father will be hearing from our attorneys." Julian, 2:41 a.m. "I love you. I know I haven't shown it, but I do. Please come home so we can talk." Julian, 3:15 a.m. "The hotel receipts aren't what you think. I can explain everything." Julian, 4:02 a.m. "I'm sitting in our bedroom looking at the ultrasound pictures. I've been a terrible husband, and I'm going to be a terrible father if you don't give me the chance to fix this." The progression painted a portrait of a family's complete unraveling, each message revealing another layer of desperation and denial. Vincent still thought lawyers could solve this. Veronica believed understanding meant Naomi accepting their behavior. Bianca had discovered consequences for the first time in her privileged life. And Julian was finally confronting what he'd become, though whether his remorse was genuine or simply fear of losing everything remained unclear. Her father knocked softly before entering, carrying a breakfast tray with decaf coffee, whole grain toast, and the fruit smoothie he'd learned to make when her mother was pregnant with Naomi's youngest brother. "Good morning, sweetheart. How's my grandson?" "Active," Naomi said, accepting the smoothie gratefully. "And how do you know it's a boy?" "I haven't even found out yet." "Father's intuition," he said with a smile that faded as he sat on the edge of her bed, his expression turning serious. "We need to talk about what happens next. The Blackwells have already retained 3 different law firms, all of whom called me before 7 this morning. They're threatening everything from lawsuits to regulatory complaints to media exposure. Vincent Blackwell apparently believes that threatening the director of the Financial Crimes Division is a sound legal strategy. Naomi sipped her smoothie, considering her options with the same careful analysis her father had taught her when she joined him at the bank during summer internships, back before she decided to study corporate law instead of finance. What did you tell them? That I'd speak with my daughter and respond appropriately. Her father paused, choosing his words carefully. But, Naomi, I need you to understand something. If we move forward with a full audit and there's enough irregularities to justify it, which there will be, Vincent Blackwell will likely face criminal charges for tax fraud. The construction company will fold. Julian's trust fund is already frozen, and if the investigation reveals the money was built on illegal activity, he could lose everything, including his ability to practice law. Bianca's credit cards are backed by the family trust, which means she'll default on about $200,000 in luxury purchases. And Veronica, he paused again. Veronica has been using the family foundation to pay for personal expenses. That's a felony. The scope of their corruption was almost impressive. A family so convinced of their own superiority that they'd build an empire on shortcuts and stolen money, never imagining anyone would look closely enough to notice. Naomi thought about the baby growing inside her, about the family name this child would carry, about whether having Julian's last name would become a liability rather than an asset. What would you do? She asked her father, trusting his judgment in a way she'd never been able to trust Julian's. Honestly, I'd destroy them, he said bluntly. They threw food at my pregnant daughter. They denied my grandson basic medical care. They've been systematically cruel to you for months. And the preliminary evidence suggests they're criminals who've been hiding behind charitable donations and country club memberships. But Naomi, I'm a father who spent 30 years protecting his children. I'm not objective about this. The question isn't what I would do. It's what you need in order to move forward with your life. A text from Julian interrupted. I'm outside your father's house. I've been here since 5 a.m. Please, just 5 minutes face to face. Naomi walked to a window and looked down at the circular driveway where Julian's BMW sat parked crookedly, as if he'd arrived in such a rush he couldn't manage straight lines. He stood beside it, still wearing last night's dinner clothes, his hair uncombed and his face shadowed with stubble and exhaustion. As she watched, he looked up at the house, not at her window specifically, but searching, and she saw something in his expression that looked almost like genuine devastation. I'll talk to him, she said quietly, but not alone. Will you come with me? Her father stood, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Always. They met Julian in the formal living room, the space where Naomi had celebrated birthdays and graduations, where her father had taught her to play chess on rainy afternoons. Julian looked worse up close, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate, his usual polished confidence replaced by raw fear. He started to speak, but Naomi raised her hand, stopping him. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, she said, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. And you're going to listen without interrupting. Can you do that? Julian nodded, then apparently remembering her request for silence, nodded again more emphatically. Here's what's going to happen, she began, her voice steady and clear. The government investigation continues. My father won't interfere with that. Vincent will face whatever charges the evidence supports. But I can influence what happens with the shareholder meeting and the company's future. You have 72 hours to meet these conditions. First, Vincent pays every single contractor he's cheated, with 20% interest for the time they've waited. Second, Veronica repays the foundation every penny she stole, plus makes a matching donation from her personal funds. Third, Bianca gets a real job, not some board position Daddy created, and starts paying down her own credit cards with her own salary. Fourth, Julian, you enter individual therapy to figure out why you became the kind of man who steals from his pregnant wife while denying her vitamin money, and who cheats while preaching financial responsibility. Julian nodded desperately, tears streaming down his face. If these conditions are met within 72 hours, Naomi continued, I will use my 38% shareholder vote to protect the company during the investigation. I'll vote to cooperate fully with authorities, separate Vincent from management, and install independent oversight. The company can survive if you're willing to clean house and operate honestly going forward. But if you waste these 72 hours, if I hear one more cruel comment, one more lie, one more excuse, I'll vote to dissolve the entire company and distribute assets to creditors and defrauded contractors. Vincent, who had arrived with Julian, opened his mouth to protest, but Julian cut him off sharply. Dad, shut up. She's giving us a chance we don't deserve. Veronica dabbed at her eyes. And what about the criminal investigation? Can't you ask your father? My father is a government official who takes his oath seriously. Naomi interrupted firmly. I will not ask him to interfere with a legitimate investigation. That would make me just as corrupt as you've been. What I'm offering is a chance to make restitution, cooperate with authorities, and possibly reduce charges through demonstrated good faith. But Vincent will face consequences for his crimes. That's non-negotiable. And our marriage? Julian whispered, his voice breaking. That depends entirely on who you choose to become over the next 72 hours, Naomi said, hand on her stomach. The man I married wouldn't have let his sister assault me. The father my son deserves wouldn't have stolen money meant for his family. I don't need you, Julian. I don't need your family's name or their company or their approval. I'm a 38% shareholder in a multi-million-dollar construction firm. I have a trust fund worth more than your entire inheritance. I'm the daughter of one of the most powerful government officials in the financial sector. What I need is a partner who will stand beside me when things are difficult, who will defend me against his own family, who will prioritize our child's well-being over maintaining his parents' delusions. You have 72 hours to prove you can be that person, or I walk away and you lose everything, including your son. The room fell silent, except for Julian's quiet sobbing. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I'll do it. All of it. Whatever it takes. See that you do, Samuelson said, speaking for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of his position. Because if you waste this opportunity my daughter is giving you, there won't be a second chance. Not from her, and certainly not from me. 72 hours to prove they can change or lose everything. That's the ultimatum Naomi just gave them. Do you think the Blackwell family will actually change? Or are they about to waste their last chance? Comment below with your predictions. This story teaches us that real power isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. If you're learning something valuable, hit that like button and subscribe to African Tales by Zion for more stories that combine entertainment with real-life wisdom. One more chapter left. The conclusion will blow your mind. After the Blackwell family left, Naomi sat with her father feeling the weight of her decision. Justice tempered with mercy, consequences balanced with opportunity, power wielded not for revenge, but for change. Proud of you, sweetheart, her father said. You could have destroyed them completely. You chose the harder path. I know, Naomi responded, but I want my son to learn that we don't become cruel just because others were cruel first. We use our power responsibly. We hold people accountable while still giving them a chance to become better. And if they waste that chance, we let them go and build something better without them. 3 days later, Julian called with a full report of their compliance. Every single contractor had been paid, with a 20% interest. The list was extensive. Small subcontractors who'd been waiting months for payment suddenly received checks with apology letters. Men who'd lost sleep over bills they couldn't pay because Vincent had withheld their rightful earnings finally got justice. Veronica had repaid the foundation and made the matching donation, nearly emptying her personal savings. The foundation director called Naomi personally to express shock and gratitude. They'd been struggling to serve the community, while Veronica had been buying designer handbags with charity funds. Bianca had accepted a junior marketing position at a competitor firm and was working 50-hour weeks for the first time in her life. Her new boss later told Naomi that Bianca had cried the first week, overwhelmed by actual responsibility, but was slowly learning what it meant to earn respect rather than demand it. Julian had attended 3 therapy sessions and had voluntarily separated their finances, giving Naomi full control. His therapist's preliminary assessment, which Julian shared with permission, noted severe enmeshment with family of origin and avoidance behaviors manifesting as emotional affair, clinical terms for what Naomi had already known. He'd never grown up, and he'd been too cowardly to end his marriage honestly. The affair had been emotional, not physical. A co-worker he'd been confiding in about his difficult marriage. Someone who'd listened to his complaints and made him feel understood. Still betrayal. Still a violation of their vows. But something had ended the moment Naomi confronted him. Vincent's lawyers had negotiated a cooperation agreement with the Financial Crimes Division. The deal was harsh but fair. He pleaded guilty to tax evasion and fraud, accepted a 2-year sentence, agreed to pay $2.3 million in restitution, and surrendered his business licenses permanently. The day he signed the plea agreement, Vincent called Naomi himself. "I want you to know," he said, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance, "that I finally understand what we did to you, not because of the investigation or the money, because my lawyer made me watch the security footage from that dinner. Made me watch my daughter throw food at you while you were pregnant. Made me watch all of us laugh while you sat there with our grandchild in your belly." He paused, and Naomi heard something that might have been genuine remorse. "I've spent my whole life thinking money and power made me better than other people. Took losing everything to realize it just made me cruel. I'm sorry, Naomi. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." True to her word, Naomi used her 38% shareholder vote to restructure the company rather than dissolve it. She voted to remove Vincent from all positions, install independent management, and rename the company Blackwelch Construction Group. The hyphenated name raised eyebrows in the industry, but Naomi explained her reasoning at the first board meeting under new management. Blackwell represents acknowledging past wrongs. Chen represents the accountability that fixes them. Together, they represent what this company will be going forward: honest, ethical, and worthy of the trust our clients place in us. The new management team implemented sweeping changes: ethical practices, fair contractor payments, transparent accounting, and a whistleblower protection program. They also established a contractor relief fund, using a portion of profits to help small businesses that had been harmed by the old management's practices. Within 6 months, the company was more profitable than it had ever been under Vincent's corrupt leadership. Clients who'd been wary after the scandal came back, impressed by the transformation. New contracts poured in from organizations that specifically wanted to work with a company that had chosen accountability over cover-up. 3 months after the ultimatum, after watching Julian's consistent effort and genuine change, Naomi cautiously agreed to couples counseling. The sessions were brutal. Their therapist, Dr. Martinez, didn't let Julian hide behind excuses or deflection. She made him confront the reality that he'd financially abused his pregnant wife while funding an emotional affair. Made him acknowledge that his family's cruelty had been enabled by his cowardice. But she also helped Naomi understand that her hiding her background, while understandable, had created an unhealthy power imbalance from the start. That true partnership required vulnerability from both sides. Slowly, painfully, they began to rebuild. Not the marriage they'd had. That was gone, dead with the food thrown at a dinner table. But something new, something honest. Julian proved himself in small, consistent ways. Defending Naomi when Veronica made a snide comment about overreacting to the dinner incident. Prioritizing Naomi's doctor's appointments over work meetings. Taking a firm stand when Bianca suggested they just forget about all the unpleasantness. "No," he told his sister firmly. "We're not forgetting. We're learning from it. And if you can't respect what Naomi went through, you can't be part of our lives." It was the first time Naomi had ever heard him choose her over his family. It wouldn't be the last. 7 months later, when their son was born healthy and perfect, with strong bones built from prenatal vitamins Julian insisted on buying personally, they held him together in the hospital room. "I'm naming him Samuel," Julian said quietly, tears in his eyes. "After your father. After the man who taught you that power should be used for justice, not cruelty." Naomi smiled, exhausted but content. "And Chun as his middle name, so he always remembers where his strength comes from." Samuel Chin Blackwell entered the world at 7:14 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, weighing 7 pounds 6 ounces, with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes. And when Naomi's father held his grandson for the first time, 3 generations of Chin strength converged in that moment. The grandfather who'd built an empire on integrity, the mother who'd wielded power with wisdom, and the baby boy who'd one day learned what both had taught. They began the slow, difficult work of rebuilding their marriage on a foundation of honesty, accountability, and mutual respect rather than hierarchy and control. Vincent served his sentence and emerged a humble man who finally understood that shortcuts and cruelty always have consequences. He spent his remaining years volunteering at community centers, teaching young entrepreneurs how to build businesses honestly. "I can't undo the damage I did," he told one class, "but I can make sure you don't make my mistakes." Veronica volunteered at women's shelters, working to help women escape the kind of toxic family dynamics she'd once perpetuated. She'd lost most of her society friends when the scandal broke, but gained something more valuable: genuine relationships based on shared purpose rather than social climbing. She became known for her fierce advocacy for domestic abuse survivors, using her story as a cautionary tale about how cruelty can hide behind respectability. Bianca discovered she actually enjoyed earning her own success and became one of the top performers at her firm. She eventually started her own marketing consultancy, building it from the ground up with ethics and hard work rather than family connections. Years later, she'd tell Naomi, "You destroyed my life and saved it at the same time. I hated you for months. Now I thank God you didn't let me continue being that person." And Naomi had learned the most powerful lesson of all. True strength isn't about destroying people who hurt you. It's about holding them accountable while still holding space for them to become better. It's about using every weapon you have: government authority, shareholder power, legal rights, family influence, not for revenge, but for justice. She'd stood up for herself when it mattered most, wielded her double power to demand dignity, and given a cruel family exactly one chance to change. Some of them took that chance and became better people. And sometimes that's the strongest thing you can do: give people the opportunity to rise to your standards and the strength to walk away if they refuse. 5 years later, when little Samuel Chin Blackwell asked his mother why his middle name was different from his last name, Naomi would tell him the story. Not all of it, not the painful parts, but the lesson at its heart. "Your names tell you where you come from," she'd say, holding his small hands in hers. Chin reminds you that you come from strength and integrity. Blackwell reminds you that people can change, that mistakes can be redeemed, that families can heal. But Samuel, your first name, is the most important. It reminds you that true power isn't about hurting people who've hurt you. It's about using your strength to demand justice, to protect those who can't protect themselves, and to give people a chance to become better than they were, even when they don't deserve it, her son would ask, his eyes wide with the innocent wisdom of childhood. "Especially when they don't deserve it," Naomi would answer, "because that's what separates justice from revenge. That's what makes us strong." And little Samuel would nod, not fully understanding yet, but carrying within him the story of a woman who'd been humiliated at a dinner table, who'd held all the power, and who'd chosen accountability over destruction. A woman who taught her family, her husband, and eventually her son that true strength lies not in the weapons you hold, but in how wisely you choose to wield them. 5 years after that fateful dinner, Blackwell Chin Construction Group won the city's Business Ethics Award, recognized for its fair labor practices, transparent accounting, and community partnerships. Naomi stood at the podium to accept the award, 7 months pregnant with her second child, a daughter they'd already decided to name Grace, for the grace she'd shown in giving second chances, while Julian watched from the audience with Samuel on his lap. The little boy waved enthusiastically at his mother, and she smiled, remembering the terrified pregnant woman who'd sat at a dinner table with food in her hair, wondering if she'd ever feel strong again. In her acceptance speech, she didn't mention the government investigation, the frozen accounts, or the night of desperate phone calls. Instead, she talked about second chances, about the power of accountability, about building something honest from the ashes of corruption. "This company learned a hard lesson," she said to the assembled crowd of business leaders and community members. "It learned that shortcuts have consequences, that cruelty has costs, that dignity and ethics aren't weaknesses. They're the foundation of any enterprise worth building. But more importantly, it learned that people can change, that families can heal, that mistakes, no matter how severe, don't have to define us forever. She paused, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, thinking of the daughter who'd be born into a family that had learned these lessons the hard way. My father once told me that true power isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about having the wisdom to turn enemies into allies, the strength to demand accountability, and the grace to offer redemption when it's earned. This award doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every person who chose to do the hard work of change, to the contractors we repaid, to the employees we treated fairly, to the family members who faced their failures and became better people, and to every person here tonight who believes that businesses can be both profitable and ethical, successful and compassionate, powerful and just. As she stepped down from the podium, her father caught her eye from across the room. He nodded once, a gesture of pride and approval that said everything words couldn't. She'd used her power wisely. She demanded justice without becoming cruel. She'd held people accountable while leaving room for redemption. And in doing so, she'd taught everyone who'd witnessed her journey the most important lesson of all. True strength isn't measured by how completely you can destroy your enemies. It's measured by how wisely you wield your power when you have every reason to be merciless and every justification for revenge. It's measured by your ability to say, I could destroy you, but I'm going to give you a chance to become better instead. And that, Naomi had learned, was the difference between power and wisdom, the difference between being feared and being respected, the difference between winning a battle and winning a war. Later that night, as she tucked Samuel into bed, he asked her the question she'd been waiting for. Mama, why did you let Grandpa Vincent come to your award ceremony? Didn't he used to be mean to you? Naomi sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing his dark hair back from his forehead. Yes, sweetheart, he was very mean. But then something important happened. He chose to become better. And when people make that choice, when they do the hard work of changing, we honor that change by giving them a place at the table. But what if they're mean again? Samuel asked, his blue eyes serious. Then we'll have another conversation, and they'll have another choice to make. But your grandfather has been kind and honest for 5 years now. He volunteers every week helping other people learn to do business the right way. He apologizes to the people he hurt. He makes sure his grandson knows that being rich or powerful doesn't make you better than anyone else. She kissed his forehead. Remember, Samuel Chin Blackwell, your name tells you who you are. Strong like the Chens, honest like what the Blackwells became, and always giving people a chance to be better while staying strong enough to walk away if they refuse. I'll remember, Mama, he promised, his eyes already closing. And Naomi knew he would, because strength like grace, like wisdom, could be taught. One generation passing the lesson to the next. One story at a time. The end. Wow, what a journey from humiliation to justice to redemption. Naomi used both her government power and shareholder rights to demand accountability, while still giving her family a chance to become better. That's true strength. What was your favorite moment in this story? What lesson hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comment below. I read every single one. If this story inspired you, empowered you, or taught you something new about standing up for yourself, smash that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to African Tales by Zion with notifications on so you never miss our next powerful tale. Remember, true strength isn't about destroying people who hurt you. It's about holding them accountable while giving them space to grow. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.